Okay, so Beau, you know, 30, 35 plus years experience doing this lean thing. I think we teamed up probably, Beau, it's probably been, maybe 5, 8 years type thing, right? And we've
Kind of. We kind of met during your PhD work while I
yeah,
was doing work at Ohio State on occasion.
yeah,
That was a really long time ago.
yeah. And then you
And then we
started coming
teamed up.
out here, tasting wine, and we became fast friends, right?
Well, I think it was the other way around. Where I was invited out, and all of a sudden I was in the winery. So, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. So,
Yeah.
Beau, did you want to tell the students a little bit about your background and, maybe, why you think this is a good thing to be talking about?
Yeah. Well, as as Eric said, I've been at this for over 3 decades. I started off in manufacturing in '86 when it wasn't called lean yet. It had not been coined until '97. So started off as everybody did in that field in automotive in 1990. Well, I got my dates down. Oh, 92. I started worrying about doing this type of stuff in the office. So I was either first or second to jump off the shop floor and saying it's more than widgets. We ought to be looking at other resources inside an organization. And in '96, I started in healthcare. So I've kind of been an early adapter to different areas. That's just the scope of the work. But what's more important is my own transformation. I'm an engineer. I'm a recovering engineer, in which engineers always have the right answer, just like physicians. They're trained to have the right answer. There's always an algorithm. You always know exactly what it is. And I got all A's as an engineer. And what I found out when I started helping people is I wasn't helping them if I was telling them what the answer was. I would be more helpful if I showed them how to think and have them get their own answer. And that's a very short statement to a 5-year process of, in my head, of turning from someone who does the thinking to someone who helps others do the thinking and create critical thinking among themselves. And so that was a huge shift about 15 years ago. And right now, let's see, I haven't been doing much for the last year. It was really cool hearing about all your projects, but I am teaching an MBA course online for the University of Dayton with a co-friend, if you will, of Eric's and mine. I'm also writing a case study on the inability of the feds to help us out in the pandemic through the Strategic National Stockpile, where they failed miserably. And I have access to CDC data to help support that case study. I'm really excited about that. Yeah. And it's the teaching case studies. Oh, and the videos, the short stops I'm doing is actually, at this point in my career, it's a give back. Yeah. How do I help people with the things that I've learned over the years in such a way that they can help themselves?
It's interesting, Beau, and I think you were our first big foray into the thinking R's and the shortstop. We actually at the summit last year, we had John Shook and some other folks, do these sort of short talks, because I think, what I've been seeing, the people's stomachs for watching a 30 or 50-minute webinar was not as good as it might be. And that thinking piece that you mentioned, well, maybe the experiment was maybe we give people a short little bite of information, get them thinking about it, and then talk back and have a little bit more of a conversational style. And that led to you saying, hey, I got 6 great things that I've learned over my career that I could, put into these little 10-minute buckets. And I think it's a really great project, and you're re-recording them now, I guess, huh?
Yeah, so the first was great. Eric and I were both learning like crazy. How does this thing actually work? But when I looked back at it, if I want these on my website, I want them to look better than the camera on my laptop and the microphone on my laptop. So I'm now re-recording them with better sound and better picture. And then I'll start advertising them on LinkedIn and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's going to be cool. And, Beau, and then, you've been a lean celebrity for me before in other classes, my undergrad class. Mostly this is the first time I've taught this MBA class in a long time. So I'm real glad that you're sort of our kickoff celebrity for this. But I shared with you the syllabus for this class. I know you teach sort of a 5-week format at Dayton, I guess, is what you were saying. But we started out in this class with, some A3 and A3 thinking. And then last week, we were talking a lot about wastes, the 7 deadly wastes. And we started people working a little bit on, how to see the difference between, value added, non-value added. And we talked maybe about, giving a little bit more of an advanced lens on that. I think some of us in the lean community think, some of that, it's good, you need to know that stuff, but there's also some deeper things going on with when you're trying to learn to see, if you will. Right?
Yeah, so 97% of the books out there talk about opportunities for the front line. The workers, the worker bees, how to fix the worker bees work. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's what Toyota did. Because Toyota didn't allow their really cool lean guys off the shop floor. So therefore, everyone wanted to copy Toyota and just did stuff on the shop floor. And what was missing was the 60% of the salary of the organization that's off the shop floor. And if you look at the salaries of the leaders and the managers, they're way more than the workers, and they do a lot of crazy stuff too that maybe they shouldn't be doing. So I think it was an opportunity lost for probably 2 decades. And still, people typically start on the shop floor, nothing wrong with that. But how do you migrate beyond that? Because problems on the shop floor should be solved by those on the shop floor, not by their managers. Managers have their own problems they should be solving. Executives have their own problems they should be solving. And that's not talked about much, but it's really, really important, which is why I thought shortstop 3 was a critical point of that.
And Beau, I think the other thing that's coming a lot into the lean community is the idea of the psychology sort of piece of it. I think there's just some human nature things. It's really hard. Like if you think you know the answer, it's really hard not to tell people the answer, right?
Well, as I said, it took me 5 years to stop.
Yeah. No,
Once I wanted to stop, it took me 5 years to really shut up, because you can't just shut up. You actually have to respond in a way that makes them think. That's hard. That takes practice. And the coaching kata is a great start as an example, but it's more than 5 questions if you're working with people. So it's not, so how do you evolve to provide value to them by helping them think better? That takes some work.
Yeah. Beau, too, I was thinking about this class and what I'm trying to share and communicate to the students. And, you and I, we've drunk the Kool-Aid. We believe in this lean stuff and helping, organizations do what they want to do. But this is also like an operations management class. And I worry sometimes, if I'm not teaching the students the classic stuff, right? So when they go in and say, okay, I took a lean operations management class at Cal Poly, and they say, well, and then somebody said, well, that's nice. I want to learn about lean but what is operations management, or how do you think about that question? I guess, like now that we know about lean, like where's the traditional operations management stuff play in, or how does that play in for you?
I'll be honest, it's been years since I thought about traditional operations management. So
Yeah, me too. I was saying I can't even remember, like, I know with Peter Ward, I've took a bunch of operations strategy courses at Ohio State and whatnot. And I'm trying to think, oh, there's all kinds of frameworks and ways to sort of think about that. But in a lot of ways, I just think, okay, in operations, I got something I've got to deliver or some value I'm trying to create or do. And I got people that, need to be working together in a process to make that happen. And for me, that's operations, right?
yeah, but I think most operations management didn't really talk about how to get along with other people.
Hmm.
I think there's great theory out there. I think there's great technique out there. I think there's all these tools out there, but they don't really address the social side of change.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you really want to get serious about change, you need to behave differently too. And I think your class is reading something on Shingo now.
Right.
It's about the behavior. And if you can't change your behavior, I guarantee, and if your manager won't change his or her behavior, no change will ever stick, ever.
Hmm.
So, because all people want to do ultimately is please their boss until they don't have that boss anymore. And if the boss doesn't change how they behave, then they can't change the process, because the change in process requires a change of behavior.
Hmm.
Typically.
Yeah.
So you're dead in the water if you're not really looking at the behavior part. And the Shingle Institute was among the first to put it together in that way. People always knew that, but they didn't really put it together in a way like that the Shingle model did. They did a great job.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that Shingle model is probably one of the best holistic, comprehensive descriptions of what lean is and how all the pieces, the areas, the levels, how that all sort of works together. So I've been pushing that. It's also really nice that they put it into a 50-page pamphlet and didn't write a 300-page book that you have to struggle through, right?
Yeah, but most of the questions are about the front line.
Yeah. That is disappointing. Are there anybody that you know of sort of working on sort of taking that Shingle model? The students need to work on that Shingle model assessment. It was one of the things they went through the questions, and they were working on that a little bit this week. But yeah, it's interesting. Doing the translation of what lean is for those frontline folks and say, okay, well, how does that work at a level above, or how does that work, in healthcare or in accounting or, in other areas? That, to me, that's fun. It's interesting work. It'd be nice if it was just sitting there off the shelf, right?
In my head, I don't think it's that different.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you went to assess a company or went to take a walk, instead of looking at the front line, look at the managers.
Mm-hmm.
Ask the same questions. Where is the evidence of different thinking and acting?
Mm-hmm.
More than half of me believes you can take the same questions and just ignore the shop floor or ignore the front line.
Yeah.
Because it should be universal.
Yeah.
Except when we're trained in the Shingle model, we're always walking to the front line. I think that's the crux that you have to kind of get out of.
Yeah. Well, and maybe it's just, I know when I do workshops and we talk through that Shingle model and I say, okay, get out your assessment sheets. I want you to think about what you're doing back at the job and in your workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And, because there is definitely a manufacturing feel or a shop floor feel to some of those questions the way they are. Maybe the big thing is just, and this could be something for these students here to listen to, is just get over the fear that, or the apprehension that those words sort of generate, right? Just somehow you got to get beyond the words and go for the intent. Mm-hmm. and understand what the intent is that they're trying to go for on those things.
Yeah, and I guess a big message to your students also is forget the Japanese.
Hmm.
It is sad to see consultants rely on the fact that they once worked at Toyota and they use all the Japanese terms. I really think that's a put down to everyone they're talking to kind of put them up on the throne. It's not about learning Japanese terms. It's about learning critical thinking and how to work better with people towards a common goal that could be measured. And what I liked about, so I listened to 9 summaries with the 9 teams. If you jotted down what their issues were for the 9, you just about have the entire population of problems that organizations go through to change. We can't find the sponsor. Yeah, that's pretty common. We're changing during their high season. Oh, that's a problem. The computer's always the answer. Well, that's a big problem. Or the computer's solving something we can't define the problem of yet, but we know it's going to be better. We just don't know why. What's I got another one there. And the bureaucracy. There's bureaucracy in every organization.
And the students will get to know me a little bit better, some of my prejudices and things. And one of the things when people describe their challenges is we have to streamline the process. And I forget which team said it, and I've heard it sort of so many times. I guess we need some fancy PhDs and things like I've got to come up with a streamlined measure. Because when people tell me it needs to be more streamlined, I say, well, how are you measuring that? And they say, well, we're making it shorter. Well, then why you streamline it? Why don't you just make it shorter, right? Or it's going to be we're going to streamline it, and they say, well, that means that less people are going to be confused about, or there's going to be less people working on it. Well, why don't you just reduce the number of people that it takes to do it? Why do you call it streamlining?
I think the important question that sponsors have to answer, and I don't know if your students are able or allowed to say this, is how are you going to measure success?
Right.
And if they can't answer that, don't do the project. Now, not easy for me to say because I can walk away.
Yeah, because you're not the professor.
Your students still need to do something. But if they can't measure success, your first step is to help them think through how they will measure success, because the rest of it is a bunch of crap if you can't measure success. And streamline, I get, but how are you going to measure it?
Right.
And they can say, well, less time where? And how much less time? It's not just a measurement, it's a target. I want to reduce by 3 days. Got it. I know how to measure that. There was one time I was working with the Mayo Clinic, and I asked them, big room full of all these important physicians and everything, and they were talking about a project in the emergency department. And I said, how do you guys want to measure success here? And there was complete silence. And then one person said, when we walk down to the emergency department and people are smiling. I got it. I got it. That's a measure. So why not?
And I don't want to give people the idea that we're only quantifiable measures are allowed in this class or whatnot, right? So there can be qualitative measures, and you can say, okay, the way I'm going to measure it is, after we're done with this, we're going to go out and ask all the people that participate in the process, is their life better, right? Is their work life better now that we've done this improvement? And that's actually kind of a key, because sometimes organizations will get very wrapped up in improving something for the bottom line, saving money, some sort of efficiency sort of measure. But you always need to also consider the people doing the work, and is this better for them at the same time, right? Those are the people in the operations, because you might be able to get something to happen temporarily or short term, but if you want it long-term sustainable, and especially if you want it to happen again, you want them to participate in some sort of process improvement, you need to get, both the results for the customer, which is the sort of the top of the pyramid on the shingle model, and that, respect for people, so that it's a better work life, a better environment for them.
Yeah.
So Beau, one of the things that intrigued me as we were sort of going back and getting ready for this conversation, you had some things in your email, and this was sort of the point of the thing about that whole sort of stop doing piece. And it, I think that when we did that as that shortstop thinking our last year, I think that really challenged a bunch of people. And and I read the article that you sent me. I'll give the students that that website that you said, where they're actually doing some research, is that behaviorally humans are additive beings, right? We always, if we're going to fix something, we never think to fix it, we're going to take something away.
We always add something to it.
We're not going to subtract, we always add. And I thought that was a fascinating insight. And it, the more I thought about it, the more it matches reality, and it speaks very well for the kinds of things we do with lean, right?
Well, yes and no. So on the front line, we're taught to subtract. Managing leaders, we add. Like, really? Where'd that come from?
So in what way? So like
well, no, just in the shortstop, I actually say when consultants and my buddies teach leaders what they call leadership standard work, which I think is a misnomer, they add something to what they should be doing. So they say, hey, this is what we want you to do, this new stuff. And they never say, stop doing what you're doing. Just add this to your plate.
Right.
And in 15 years, no one's figured out that they should be asking them to reduce some stuff that they're doing that doesn't make sense anymore, to make room for the work they should be doing.
Right.
And it befuddles me when I look at my community, why they don't challenge themselves, challenge the leaders to do smarter work and avoid not so smart work. Most work was once essential. Most work once made sense. It's different now. So how do we recognize that? That was pre-pandemic. Now we should be so razor focused on how we use our capacity that it like everything else doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. All that matters is how do we get through to the next 2 years with some type of reasonable target for our businesses and meet them. And you can't do that by continuing to work the way you've always worked. You've got to change your work to do that.
It occurs to me, Bob, I'm doing a little bit of a disservice to my students, probably not doing the respect for individual thing. We might have some questions building up. Beau and I can do this for hours. But we're not gonna. I've set my timer. I said we got about 13 more minutes, Beau, and then I want to kind of get off so we can move on and do some other things for the class. But let's open it up. So if you got a question for Beau, if you type it in the chat, I don't like reading chats, but I will call on you to read your own question if you want. But if you put something in the chat, that'll get our attention, and we can go ahead and talk a little bit about that if students have questions. Interesting. So, but like on the the stop doing, and this is like when we're listening to the webinar, I thought that was a great insight, but I looked at it like a 5S housekeeping exercise where I got all this stuff on my plate, and I need to take sort out the unnecessary, right? Let's get all the unnecessary stuff off my plate, and then the stuff that's remaining on my plate is sort of the value added thing. but then recently when you were sort of pointing this out to me, I said, also, when I'm going into problem solving, I'm coming up with a solution. So I've now somehow added a solution, but could that solution actually be a subtraction? Are there subtractive solutions that play? And
sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
That's my Siri wants to get into that conversation. No students, but Siri's there. So I don't know. So I'm sort of intrigued. What are your thoughts on that? So solutions that subtract versus solutions that add. Is that a thing, or is there some way to think about that?
I maybe I have blinders on, but it's all about capacity.
Yeah.
And a message to you students, everything in operations management is about capacity. It always has been and always will be. What the heck are you doing with the capacity that you have? Are you happy with it? Are you not happy with it? Is it effective? Is it efficient? And the capacity could be machines, could be people, could be intellectual property, could be IT, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What are you doing with your capacity? So the shortstop that I asked you to look at talked about people capacity of leaders. It's all about capacity. And all we're doing is overburdening everybody. So how do we start to subtract?
Mm-hmm.
Because we haven't given the due diligence of what you want to call the 5S of throwing out stuff that doesn't make sense anymore. So making a list, getting back to your point, is like a 5S,
Mm-hmm.
but how you implement it is very different. Because if you take away work, that work touches somebody. So you have to go get an agreement with the person that touches says, I don't want to do this anymore. How is that okay? So it's not mechanical, it's also social, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I do, but I did want to share a story. This is a real one. Maybe 10 years ago. In fact, Eric, you might be able to date it for me when I give you the example.
Yeah.
I was doing just a little bit of work with Ford at corporate headquarters. And we were in the middle of a workshop, and the QA director said, I have to leave for a while. And she had this big notebook with her. I said, oh, okay. Where are you going? And she said, I'm going to talk to the president. It's our monthly quality review. I said, oh, okay. So when are you coming back? Oh, I won't be back. It was like 2 o'clock. I said, really? Because, yeah, don't you see this notebook? I have to go through every single chart with him to tell him what it's saying. All this big chart. I'm thinking, wow. So I didn't know what to say, except I thought that must be a waste of time for the president. I didn't say that out loud, but that's got to be an absolute waste of. I bet he's looking forward to that. So 2 months later, literally 2 months later, Ford was in all the headlines for a recall on brakes. Do you remember that? I think it might have been Mustang brakes.
Yeah.
And they were suggesting that Ford was doing a cover-up on the data. And I was driving down the road and said, no, they're not. It's buried in those charts. They have all the data. They don't know how to turn the data into facts.
Yeah.
And if I was the president, I would want to know just a couple of things once a month.
Yeah.
What are the trends I need to worry about in terms of quality? And what's the financial impact? What's the risk?
Yeah.
Thank you. You can leave. 5 minutes. Do I have a third one? Do I need to make a recall or not?
Yeah.
2 pieces of information, a decision. 10 minutes, you're done.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is incredible. They don't know, they're just gathering data.
Yeah.
They're not helping anybody. They're just gathering data. So if you look at subtraction from the president is, I don't want that kind of crap anymore. I want to know what the trends are, what the financial risk is, and if I need to make a recall. From the QA director standpoint is, I don't want to spend, well, she probably does want to spend 3 hours with the president, but I don't want to spend 3 hours with the president anymore. I want to do something else. Those are both subtraction efforts.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, and your story sort of reminds me of one of my pet peeves, you know, working in a big bureaucracy like Cal Poly, you know, every single, you know, request or form, you know, has 5 or 6 signatures, you know, as it goes through. And I actually kept data on as an area chair, how many forms I signed a week. And it was about 15 or 20, you know, forms per week that I would sign. And really, I was trying to communicate to people, and part of my recommendation was, as a manager, as the department manager, I don't want to sign all these forms, because the only reason they were sending these forms across my desk is they wanted me to be aware that students were requesting substitutions, or, you know, students had, you know, signed up for minors, or students had, you know, done these things. They wanted me to have the visibility on it. I would just assume, don't make me sign all this stuff. Send me a report every month. Just tell me how many students are, you know, entering the major versus how many students are leaving the major. Tell me how many students are asking for a substitution on these categories of classes versus these. I want the information. I don't want to do the signing and the individual signing. And the point information is worthless, right? I need the trends. You know, I need to, is this going up or going down? If it's, you know, 50 or 11 or 15 signatures a week, and it's just sort of nothing's unusual is happening, I don't really need to see all that stuff, right?
Yeah. Hey, we have a question from Tyler.
Oh yeah, Tyler, go ahead and ask your question. I'm sorry.
Oh no, I just put it in. I was just curious, would you say that sort of example of between levels is maybe like one of the prime ways to subtract things that really, like, you actually do the same amount of work, it's just less people doing this repeated work? That's kind of maybe one of the most significant ways that you could easily cut waste?
Oh, possibly. So forward was an example. If I try to fast forward or think back to how that shortstop would work it forward, it would probably be the president saying, I don't want to spend 3 hours listening. It would not have been the QA director saying, I don't want to spend 3 hours with the president. A different purpose. So the president would say, hey, I just need one sheet that I can read in 5 minutes. That's it. So that's a subtraction. But in the example for shortstop 3, the executive VP saved 15 hours a week through subtraction, and almost all of it was between levels. He says, I'm just overhead. I don't need to do all this stuff. I trust the guys who work for me. They can make the decision. Just tell me what it was. So that's one really good way. If you think of that one graphic with you in the middle in the 4 different areas, that's a really good way between boss and subordinate. But there could be stuff sideways too. It all depends on what you're doing. And so if you use something like the capacity bucket to saying, where am I spending time that's not really my core work, and what elements are really filling that up, a lot of times it'll be between levels, but not always. Good question.
Yeah, I think it's one thing I really, thank you, Tyler. It's one thing I really want the students to come away from in this class is really a deeper understanding of, when they're looking at a situation or looking at the work, understanding the difference between, you know, value added and non-value added. Like, what are the things that are helping my organization move forward, achieving their goals, doing good for my customers, versus all the other stuff that we pile on ourselves that, you know, either makes us feel important, or it's activity for the sake of activity. You know, just I think asking those questions to challenge that, and, you know, just like as managers, we're challenging the people on the front line. Is that really value added or non-value added? We ought to be asking that same question, and even harder, of the management staff, really.
Oh, one more piece for Tyler. So when you draw a value stream map, I always make a special point of looking at reviews. And a lot of time reviews are with the boss. So one thing I always capture when there's a review, the percentage of time it's approved. Because if it's approved all the time, why am I going to the boss?
Yeah.
And if it's not approved all the time, what does the boss know that he or she's not telling me? Because why would I ever take work to them that I think is going to be rejected?
Yeah.
So one way or another, reviews are just this primo centric place to get rid of stuff. They usually don't work well.
Right. Yeah, good point.
Do we have time for that other slide?
Well, let's see. So I'm thinking, no, actually, no, Beau. No. I think this has been a good conversation. I want to kind of wrap things up a little bit, and we'll probably take a little 5-minute break for the students and myself, and then we'll move on to some other things. But thank you both for doing this so much. Is there some sort of so here is our next generation of lean managers, right? We've got about 40 folks in the audience here that are going to go off and try to change the world or improve the world, hopefully. Are there some parting shots of advice or things that you could give them that start them off on their like 30+ year lean journey? What do you think?
Well, two things. You can't create change without relationships, good relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just having the right technical answer. You have to be able to work with people to understand why it's good for the company and good for them. And I just forgot my second one. I think, oh, I know. Most people who are getting an MBA, aren't really into operations. You're into marketing, finance, accounting, HR, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And chances are you're going to get a job in those other fields and go off and running at 100 miles an hour down through that field. What is important to remember is that whatever you do, you're going to have an impact on operations. Every change you make, good or bad, is going to have an impact on operations. So a company can't succeed without good operations. You can have great marketing and fail. If Amazon promised 2-day delivery and never got anything better than 2 weeks, they would fail. You need the operations to support the success. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the buy a coffee for your operations folks, or take your operations manager out to lunch pitch right there. So I always love that. Beau, thank you so much for doing this. It's really appreciated. Since I'm recording this, I'm going to go into gallery view here. Let's go ahead and give Beau a little bit of applause. Okay, so it's a little American Sign Language applause symbol. Beau, thank you so much for doing this.